Good afternoon. I'm Jamie Franklin, curator here at the Bennington Museum. Welcome to another episode of Chats with Jamie. Today, I am very pleased to be speaking with Sha'an Mouliert and Mia Schulz, who I had the great privilege of getting to know in conjunction with an exhibition that we hosted here back in the fall of last year, 2019, Visible in Vermont. And today, I wanted to just invite them to come here and have a chat about that project, the Visible in Vermont project, and other things that they're working on. So without any further ado, let us introduce Sha'an and Mia.
Hello.
Hi, Mia.
Hello, Jamie. Thank you for having us.
Yes, and Sha'an, welcome. Well, welcome both. The exhibition that was here at the Bennington Museum last fall, Visible in Vermont, was really, for me, it was really a wonderful experience, both getting to know you and to get to know the project better and sharing it with our audience. So, Sha'an, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about how Visible in Vermont, which was part of a larger project, as I understand it, that was organized by the Root Center for Social Justice, which I believe is based out of Brattleboro, and it was part of their project, I Am Vermont Too. Can you tell us a little bit about Roots and who they are, and about the larger project and how it evolved into the exhibition that came to Bennington?
Yes, thank you. The Root Social Justice Center, which is located in Brattleboro, has several programs, of which I Am Vermont Too is one. They have Youth for Change. They also support LGBTQ. They also have Soul Food Sundays and have a space when we get back to opening spaces for the public, for BIPOC. They're also a part of BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. I Am Vermont Too is a photo story project that came out of the Root as a way to use the arts to highlight people of color that live in Vermont, work or study in Vermont, and their value to their community, and also a way to validate their experience.
So, Sha'an, you were kind of responsible for the larger exhibition, which has traveled to other locations throughout the state since being here in Bennington, and I'm hoping may continue to travel to other venues. But Mia, you were kind of the person on the ground here in Bennington that helped coordinate the Bennington part of things. And I believe it was Kaya Morris who put us in touch. How did you end up kind of inviting people and kind of bringing together? So the exhibition was composed of, I believe, 33 photographs, about half of which were from the original exhibit. And then I think you ended up with Sha'an creating 16 more images from local people. Can you just tell us a little bit about kind of your role here in the community and how you pulled together that part of the exhibition here in Bennington to really ground it in our own community?
Sure. First of all, I'd just like to clarify that this is a traveling exhibit, and so it goes throughout the different communities in Vermont. And in each location, there is a site coordinator. And so it wouldn't just, it's so that it's a collaborative effort. I was the site collaborator for Bennington, and Sha'an is the person who brings it to all of our communities. So via the Root Social Justice. So yeah, you know, I am the first African-American woman to hold an office at the town of Democrat Party, the Democrat Town Party. I have made a lot of relationships with Black, Indigenous, people of color in this community. And we see ourselves almost as a network to help each other. And so it was not that hard to find people who wanted to participate in this, because a lot of time we find ourselves to be both visible, extremely visible, and invisible. at the same time. By invisible, we mean our voices are not heard. And this was an opportunity for our voices to be heard and seen in a space like Bennington Museum. So it was, people were eager to be able to be heard in that manner. So it wasn't that hard to find that many. And in fact, after the exhibit, many people came up later saying that they would like to be part of the project. So there's a lot of people here in Vermont who are not heard. And so this was a means of which to be heard and seen.
That's great, thank you. And why don't we bring up the first image that we have so we can kind of see what we're talking about here in terms of the images so this first image is of Paige Wadlig Bailey. And Sha'an, I believe this is one of the first images that was created for the exhibition. Can you tell us a little bit about what your mission was for the exhibition and the project as a whole, and how you kind of came to this format of the subjects of the photographs holding this sign with a quote or relating an instance of a racial microaggression, which is kind of the basic format that the exhibition took?
So, Jamie, need to make some corrections here.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't my idea. It came from Sheila Linton, who was inspired by Harvard med students who had I2 Harvard. It was an initiative. And she thought that that might work well here in Vermont. And so it came out of, they held a whiteboard. Theirs was a group photo. It was decided to use that format, and theirs just said, I am Harvard. We used the hashtag I am Vermont too. And as a way not only to express the microaggressions that we have, but to display it to the mostly white population, but also to connect BIPOC that they have similar experience. The first State House exhibit, which is what Paige's photo is from, was taken by multiple photographers. And Paige was on her last chapter of her life, and we were really wanting to have her be not only a part, but decided to be a foundation, I ain't going nowhere, of the collection as a tribute to the work that she's done for decades around racial justice, and as inspiration for those of us who are here. And she had passed away in August of 2016, and the photo was taken, I would say maybe 3 weeks before that. I was not the photographer.
Well, why don't we take a look at the next image now? And this, of course, is of Mia. So Mia, what can you tell us about this image and kind of how you chose to pick your kind of mini story and kind of your own experiences of kind of racial microaggressions here in our own community here in Bennington?
So I remember this day clearly. I had just finished receiving an email back from the Mount Anthony Union School administrator indicating that they were not going to be able to pursue looking into some information regarding some Aryan Brotherhood kids who were flashing Aryan Brotherhood signs. I had sent a couple of days earlier an email with a photograph showing high school students that my children knew flashing Aryan Brotherhood signs. I forwarded it over to the school administrators, and on this day they responded saying I misunderstood the sign and that they would not be doing anything further regarding this. That brought me to a space of, well, just obviously terror for my kids and wondering how I was going to address that. And they insinuated that I was being very sensitive. So it was because I want safety for my kids, because I need safety for my kids, because I need the same experience or that their white counterparts would receive, and including a same response to my complaint that I did not get that. That's where that caption came from.
Why don't we take a look at the third image that we have here? And one of the things for me, I, as being a white male and having grown up in largely white communities, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I've lived here in Bennington for the last 15 years. You know, a lot of times, you know, some of the different sayings and phrases, including yours, Mia, they seem fairly innocuous, but when you start to listen to the stories that are being told and the idea that people of color like yourself are living with these scenarios on a daily basis, it starts to open, I know it opened my eyes at least. So it was a really powerful exhibit because you had this lineup of some 33 images. And I was also, one of the real strengths from my perspective of the exhibition was the diversity of voices and people that the exhibition shared with the public. And so the last two photographs that we saw were both of Black women. This is of a young Black man. The exhibition, as I understand it, and please clarify me if I misstate anything, you invited people who self-identified as people of color. And you know, the terminology which Sha'an mentioned earlier, BIPOC or Black Indigenous people of color, you know, there were also people of Asian and Middle Eastern descent that were photographed and part of the exhibition. And so it really gave a sense of the diversity of people and their experiences and their stories. Can you, either of you, can you tell me a little bit about this photograph of Shamel Alexander and kind of the background to this photograph and his story, if you know it?
If you don't mind, Sha'an, I will address it. I think that we picked this image because Shamel Alexander recently settled a $30,000 lawsuit with the Bennington Police Department. He was pulled over basically for being Black, and the court determined that. And so we felt that it was quite relevant to today and what's currently happening right now with police. Well, it's always happened with police. Well, it's currently being spotlighted. And so we felt like since his lawsuit was just settled and there is some dispute on whether or not Bennington Police Department has some of the systemic racism that is been demonstrated throughout the United States, this here kind of solidifies whether or not there is systemic racism in the Bennington Police Department. I think it's quite evident by the $30,000 settlement. So that's where that story comes from.
No, thank you. And that's actually a perfect segue, actually, to kind of as we wrap things up. Though I don't want to necessarily rush us because I think the next question is a very important one, and I'm going to address it to both Sha'an and Mia. You know, I've been asking my guests here on Chats with Jamie, you know, what have your experiences been over the last 4 months? We've been living through very trying times, of course, with the pandemic, but now over the course of the last 6 weeks or so, with the kind of national limelight shining on the Black Lives Movement and issues of police brutality, with the deaths of many, many people of color. And you know, I know that it's all over the country, and it's here in Vermont too. And I know that there have been a number of rallies here in Vermont and in Bennington. I know, Sha'an, you're up in in the Northeast Kingdom near St. Johnsbury. Can either of you just speak about your own personal experiences over the course of the last 4 months as it relates to kind of the social and cultural turmoil that we're all going through as a nation and as a state here in Vermont?
I think I would not be remiss to say, at least for many Black people, generally speaking, the last few months have been extremely challenging. And one of the challenges is that white folks are asking us, noticing us, and sometimes maybe supportive. Many of us feel it's performative. I Am Vermont too was born out of the fact that we were invisible and that it took murder taped and shown for white folks to recognize something that has been our daily experience. They have invalidated our experience, and that's why we have I Am Vermont too. Visible in Vermont was a, I would say, short campaign project that was sponsored by Vermont Council on the Humanities to just like, here we are. So as much as we've been saying, here we are, it took a murder. That goes back to our value. How our value in our community has been negated. It took a murder for us to be recognized. So I weigh that as an artist, as an activist artist who uses this medium, a photo story project, and it took violence for people to notice. The pandemic, as we know, Vermont hasn't been immune. That people of color have been disproportionately affected, health-wise, education-wise, employment. We had exhibits planned. One at Vermont Law School, looking forward to that. If we're looking at the seeds of change, putting up a sign, even our exhibit, is just the hello. And people are stopping at that. And that's one of the things that challenge me, that they stop at being performative. I Am Vermont Choose Maine, besides letting white folks know, is our transformative, is making those connections, as I did with Mia, as Mia did with her community, as we are trying to do statewide. We had a person who was in the St. Johnsbury, Caledonia exhibit that was displayed at the Athenaeum, and he just opened up a new business, a brewery, and wanted to have the exhibit displayed, but Corona hit. We became creative and thought maybe having lawn signs, like they have the graduation signs, but not out because I was fearful, but maybe in store windows. We were going to go with that on Railroad Street until somebody on Railroad Street chalked in ACAB and American flag, and underneath that, BLM, as well as the Diary of a Wimpy Kid drawing. All of a sudden, it did not feel safe. All of a sudden, having it out there, because the exhibit has been inside, so you would feel, because these are folks in the community. I'll go down that street. I was sitting there not feeling safe. Time passes, we open up the spigot, unintended. He's having people who can come into the brewery. We will be able to have the exhibit, first one of his many, he hopes, in the gallery that he plans to showcase BIPOC. Jeffrey Sawaki is his name. The Whirligig is the name of his establishment. These are the tentacles. These are the networks. These are how we are looking to, when I say transformative, you showcase who we are, especially if there's a way to pay us for who we are. You are adding to the economic and the cultural vibrancy of your community.
Thank you. That's great. And Mia, what can you kind of tell us about your experiences of the last few months?
I would just like to echo so much of what Sha'an said. You know, we have been on high alert. People coming out of the woodworks to reach out, to tell us, we support you, we're with you, what can I do for you? And so I suppose that should be something that I'm grateful for, and I am grateful for thought, but I really need transformation. So when we have these conversations and talk about, you know, changing the way logos look and changing, you know, certain phrases that we use every day, you know, that's great. But I would also like to change the police and our schools and our medical system and our housing and our economics. And so it has to go beyond performative. And I see all of my BIPOC friends and family seeing this as a time to push that measure through, and on extra stress, high alert, trying to push policy through, push, you know, change in all of those systems, just to get pushback to say, but we stood on the corner with a candle saying their names. And so it's still almost like going to those microaggressions that I see you, I hear you, I love you, but I'm not willing to go to the police and tell them they need to redo everything in there. They need to transform. I'm not willing to call the superintendent and find out why there's Aryan Brotherhood in my school. I'm not willing to do any of that because that's too hard. And if that's too hard for white people to do, can you imagine how hard it is for us to live and say and try to get out across to people? It is very hard. So that stress has been amplified, but we're very cautious. And Sha'an had told me one thing: we talk to each other daily and we motivate each other daily. And she told me one thing, that we have streets named after Martin Luther King Jr. in every major city in the United States, and a holiday named after him as well. And we still watched a Black man be murdered on television. So we have to move beyond the performative, and we need our people who see us at these exhibits to see us and want to change so that we all have a better life.
That's Perfect. Thank you. It really has been a pleasure to be able to catch up, to hear your stories, to share the exhibit with our audience here at the museum. And I know you said that it's there at the brewery in St. Johnsbury. Are there any other plans for the exhibition to be traveling beyond this point yet?
It hasn't been installed. We haven't secured their installation date. You know how that is, Jamie.
Well, no, and I also understand how difficult it is to organize exhibitions during COVID. So
yes, so we'll be happy to let you know, as well as everyone else. And because of COVID, right now, that's the only exhibit that we have. As you know, people are in uncertainty and public spaces. So the brewery is our next display.
excellent. Well, again, I want to thank both of you. I want to, again, for opening up, sharing your experiences, and just be well. And I look forward to seeing you both again sometime soon in person in the near future. So thank you both.
Thank you.